Ron DeSantis, of which I now have more respect for because he actually came out and is the first candidate declared so far not to talk in such mealy-mouthed terms, although still just a little bit, and actually take a shot at Trump, defend himself from the accusations that have been hurled his way. In an interview on the Ben Shapiro show, here's what he had to say.
So how do you see a difference between your candidacy, what you've been trying to do, your record, and President Trump?
Well, I think it's interesting because he's been attacking me by moving left. So this is a different guy than 2015, 2016. He attacked me for opposing an amnesty bill in the Congress. He did support this amnesty, this good lot too. 2 million illegal aliens he wanted to amnesty. I opposed it because that's what America First principles dictate, that you're opposed to amnesty. We both faced COVID-19 and we both responded in the way we did. He responded by elevating Anthony Fauci and really turning the reins over to Dr. Fauci, and I think to terrible consequences for the United States. I was the leader in this country in fighting back against Fauci. We bucked him every step of the way, starting in April of 2020, whether it's the schools, the businesses, the mandates, and our state has never done better as a result. And I think the fact that Donald Trump gave Anthony Fauci a presidential commendation on Trump's last day in office, that was a gut punch to millions of people around this country who were harmed by Fauci's lockdowns. I've said very clearly, if I'm president, somebody like Fauci is in the government, I will bring them in and I will tell them two things. You are fired.
So, I mean, look, Krystal, I have to at least respect him for prosecuting a case against Trump. He's literally the first person to do so. Now, will I think it work? We'll see. So on the first part, on the amnesty, I think it's very interesting rhetorically where he's talking about how Trump is attacking him from the left. Obviously, immigration, probably the #1 reason why Trump was the nominee in 2016, an issue that matters tremendously to the base. The problem I see for DeSantis is, well, rhetorically, on policy, you may be right. Rhetorically, can you really outdo the Donald whenever it comes to the guy who literally created the wall?
Right.
Or at
Rapists,
the very least,
murderers, some I presume are good people, et cetera.
it's going to be tough,
yeah.
I think, to be able to come out against him and to convince people that you're the real deal. Although, if it were to work, this is probably the only way. The Fauci thing, I also think is interesting. I'm curious for your thoughts. I just feel as if running backwards, as in relitigating COVID policy from 3 years ago, is not the winner that some of these people seem to think. COVID policy, lockdowns and all that stuff, it matters a lot to a lot of people on the internet, and it also matters a lot to people who are very, very online.
Yeah.
At least in my experience. But normal voters who I have seen out, or especially interviews as well, whenever they talk about DeSantis and Trump, not one of them mentions COVID.
Right.
They say, I like that he doesn't have the drama. I like that he kept Florida, or he made Florida nice.
Yeah.
Some of that has to do with COVID, but focusing on the COVID piece just seems a little out of step where I think some people are going to vote for him anyways.
I mean, we've seen the numbers. Like,
people don't care.
People have moved on, and understandably so. We're all moving forward, right? So I think in a sort of like rational, sane world, I think some of these attacks may land.
Yeah.
But I just see no evidence that the GOP base is actually that ideological. And DeSantis made this comment in that attack where he's like, this is different than Trump in 2015, 2016. Is it? Because they tried the same line of attack against Trump back then.
Yeah,
Ted Cruz in particular, it was like, he's not a real conservative. We're further to the right. Here, he was a Democrat. He supported Planned Parenthood. He's not. They were trying to attack him from the right and say, we're the true conservatives and he is this rhino. And it just didn't work at all. So I do remember, this does feel like almost another deja vu moment of the type of attacks that they launched at him last time around, which ultimately fell flat. Now, I agree with you, like, respect to him for at least trying, because this is at least a lot less humiliating than, like, Nikki Haley, I'm not kicking sideways, or even Tim Scott, who's like, I love Trump. His time in office was fantastic. And it's like, okay, well, why are you running against him then? That doesn't make any sense. Or certainly Mike Pence, who it's just humiliating that, because of Trump, people were running around the Capitol threatening to hang him, and he can't even come out strongly against him even now after all of that. So it's a much less humiliating approach. And, to be honest with you, I also don't think that he's going to pay a huge price for going after Trump in this way, because it is very policy-based. Do I think that it's going to be sufficient? No. And this gets back to like, you know, we were being hard on DeSantis about you got to hit him and you got to do this and you got to do that. And I just look at the landscape and I'm like, I'm just not really sure there's anything you alone can do to knock this guy off. So it's a solid attempt. Do I think it's really going to work? Probably not.
Yeah, it probably won't work. It's great that point that you brought up. Like Ted Cruz and Rubio and Jeb tried this. They're like, he's not a conservative. He supports Social Security. And he's like, yeah, I support Social Security. They're like, he supports universal health care. He's like, yeah, you know, everyone will have health care under my policy. He's like, he does not supports free trade. He said, yep, he's right. I don't support free trade. In many ways, Trump's moderation on policy was a huge net positive to him on top of his rhetoric in the 2016 campaign. He was extreme on the right issues for the base and then not extreme on the issues that didn't necessarily matter. So immigration, though, this is I think a good attempt, and you got to at least respect somebody who's going to fight in the primary. Now, will he be able to do that to his face? Is he going to continue to keep it up? How will it respond to the poll numbers? That is the ultimate question. But one part that really stuck out to us is actually where DeSantis, again, correctly hits Trump on mail-in voting, and this was a fascinating part of this interview that hasn't taken as much notice. Let's take a listen.
Can you talk about your sort of on-the-ground strategy and how that would be different from what President Trump did in 2020 running against the Democrats?
I think telling people not to send in a mail ballot is a huge mistake, and it ends up reducing the pool of prospective voters. In Florida, we focused on some of these low propensity voters in my reelection. They usually vote in presidential. They don't always vote in midterm. And we converted a lot of them to vote. Most of them chose to vote by absentee ballot through the mail. That was their choice. If we told them you could only vote on election day, some of them very well may not have voted. So understand the battlefield. It's your responsibility as a candidate to head off that.
He's right. It's obvious. He's obviously right. I actually love that he said that. He's the first high-profile elected Republican to actually say it. Because guess what? Trump absolutely 100% would have won if he had just encouraged mail-in voting. That's the funniest thing. He can be like, it's the most patriotic way to vote. It's the MAGA way. And guess what? He would have won Georgia. He absolutely, in my opinion, would have won Arizona. And all he needed was to flip a single other state, and the turnout probably would have been even higher. Remember, guys, he got 10 million more votes. He was campaigning against the easiest way to vote. Like, he got 10 million more than when he ran in 2016. Some, 75 million or whatever people came out to vote for him. It's just one of those where it's so obvious. And the Georgia, if you don't believe me, the Georgia Secretary of State has already put out the data where if just the number of people who voted in the GOP primary by mail had done so in the 2020 election, whenever it was Biden v. Trump, Trump wins the state. He did not lose by all that much. So DeSantis, coming on the heels of what I still believe is his best strength. I won. I turned this state 20 points, purple to deep red. I did it because I'm a winner. I did it on policy, and I want to make America just like what I did down in Florida. That's a very compelling message to a certain group of people. Now, unfortunately, those group are mostly general election voters, not necessarily primary voters. But with this, I at least have to say once again, respected the man for at least trying.
Yeah.
He's making a good case.
Well, what's interesting is even Trump has changed his mind about mail-in voting. At CPAC, I think it was this year, he said it's time to change our thinking on early and mail-in voting. He also touted his campaign's plans to encourage quote-unquote ballot harvesting, which of course had been like, you know, derided as practically illegal, even though in some states it actually is legal by Republicans. He says we have no choice but to beat Democrats at their own game. So even Trump at this point acknowledges that the mail-in voting thing was a catastrophe for them. Certainly in the state of Georgia, we have the numbers that if he had just embraced mail-in voting,
he wins.
He wins. Yeah. There's another subtext here, though, which is about, you know, obviously what is a hot issue for the Republican base, which is Stop the Steal 2020. Was it legitimate or not? And the subtext of what DeSantis is suggesting here is that it was legitimate, and the reason your ass lost is because of things like mail-in voting. Now, this represents, though, another area where, you know, to this point, DeSantis hasn't really had to be put on the spot about what he fully thinks about 2020. And it's another issue that hangs out there as a very difficult, tricky one for him to navigate. Because on the one hand, you go full crazy, your electability case is going to fall apart, because we saw what happened to, Mastriano and Carrie Lake and these other characters who were all in on Stop the Steal. On the other hand, the overwhelming majority of the Republican base still thinks that the 2020 election was stolen. So
it's tough.
This is one of the ones that's going to be very tricky to navigate. But yeah, I think the subtext of what he's saying there is you lost, and one of the reasons you lost is because you didn't embrace bail-in voting here.
It's a Gordian knot. I really
It
don't know how you get yourself out of it. I feel for the man, to be honest, because it's like in any rational way, you're like, this obviously should work. But, we don't, as he said, we don't live in a rational world.
Hey guys, ready or not, 2024 is fully upon us now, and Saagar and I have been brainstorming ways that we can really up our game for this critical election.
Yeah, we rely on our premium subs to expand our coverage, to add staff, to upgrade the studio. We just want to give you the best independent coverage of this election, which is possible. So if you can help us out, become a premium subscriber today, breakingpoints.com, or the link is down here in the description video. It really means the world to us, and if you like what we're all about, this is the best possible way to keep us 100% independent, working only for you.